If you're learning fashion illustrations in Procreate and Ruffles still confuse you when you shade them, the ruffles are not the problem, your shading logic is. In this video, I'm going to break down how I place shadows and highlights on this dress, from the ruffle bodice all the way down to the voluminous skirt, so you can see exactly where each tone goes and why it belongs there. And if you want to see this approach applied to other dress styles, let me know in the comments and I'll send you the free tutorial links. So here's the thing about this dress. On the bodice, there's a ruffle, or fabric folding over itself, gathered tightly along the neckline. And at the bottom, there's a full voluminous skirt that flares outward and curves away from the body. Both parts have volume, so the same shading principles apply, but the volume shows up differently in each one. So you have to pay attention to how the fabric behaves in each session. So I'm going to walk you through exactly how I approach each part. I'm going to start with the ruffle. I use the top front lighting as usual. So here's the thing. Whenever I see volume, whether it's on a skirt or in this case, a ruffle bodice, the first thing I think about is my heels and valleys method. I use this approach constantly in my tutorials because it works every time. Think about this ruffle the same way. You've got the peaks of the fabric, those are the heels. I've done drawing assist on, so you'll see the arrows mirror on the other side too. And then, in between each heel, you've got the areas where the fabric dips inward. Those are the valleys. I'm going to switch to a different color so you can see the difference clearly. Now, these hills sit higher than the valleys. Since we're using top front lighting, those raised areas are going to catch more light. That's why they get lighter tones and the dip areas stay darker. That's the first thing to notice. Second thing is, these ruffles span outward as they reach the hemline. Near the bottom edge, the folds are bigger and more spread out, so there's more volume there. But up along the neckline, the extra fabric is compressed and gathered tightly together. That's why you see these little bunch of gathers along the neckline. We're going to render these gathers as alternating highlights and shadows to show each tiny fold catching or blocking the light. Third thing is, I added more shadows along the hemline of the ruffle to show the fabric thickness. And fourth, the underside of the ruffles will be significantly darker. Any surface that faces downward and away from our top front light source is going to sit in shadow. So wherever the ruffle curls enter or folds back on itself, that interior face goes dark. And that's everything for the ruffles. Now let's move down to the skirt. We've got volume here again, a big full skirt, so we're going right back to the heels and valleys method. These ridged folds catch more highlights, and the reset areas between them fall into shadow. Same principle, just on a larger scale. Now the light is coming from the top front, and this skirt has a lot of volume to it. It's not lying flat against the body, it balloons outward and curves backward. So the sides of the skirt are going to pick up some shadow too, because those surfaces are turned away from the light source. And just like I did with the ruffles, I've added more shadows along the hemline of the skirt to show the thickness of the fabric. The underside of the skirt will be dark, same logic as the ruffles. Any surface facing down and away from the light doesn't get illuminated. And here's one more thing. The ruffle sitting on top of the bodice is going to cast a shadow down onto the skirt. It's sitting above the skirt, so it blocks some of the light from reaching the fabric directly beneath it. That cast shadows help separate the two pieces. And that's everything for the skirt. So, when you look at this dress as a whole, the shading really comes down to a few repeating ideas. Heels and valleys handle the volume, both in the ruffles and in the skirt. Top front lighting tells you which surfaces catch light and which ones turn into shadow. Hemline shadows show fabric thickness. Undersides go dark. And wherever one layer sits on top of another, like the ruffle over the skirt, you get a cast shadow. So you're not inventing new rules for every session, you're applying the same logic in different places. And that's what makes the shading feel consistent and believable across the entire dress. Now before you go, let me show you how I got this pattern on the dress. I use an instant pattern brush for this butterfly pattern. You can find it in my Procreate Studio vault. You'll also get over 160 instant pattern brushes and ready-to-use fabric patterns in there. I'll drop the link in the description. And if you'd like to watch a full shading breakdown of voluminous gown step by step just like this one, go watch this video on screen. I'll see you there.